Did you know that LEGO was just a few years away from bankruptcy before it reinvented itself by targeting adults? In the early 2000s, the company faced severe losses and a leadership change that pushed it to reconsider its future. What once seemed like a children's toy brand became a billion-euro business built on systematic use of scarcity, nostalgia, and premium positioning to keep customers engaged. The question is, how did a toy company transform childhood memories and stress relief into a repeatable profit system for adults? Let's break down how LEGO cut distractions, monetized nostalgia, engineered scarcity, and sold mindfulness as a luxury ritual. It all begins with a near collapse that forced LEGO to make the toughest decision in its history. By the early 2000s, LEGO found itself in serious financial trouble. The company had stretched far beyond its core identity, venturing into theme parks, clothing, video games, and product lines that had little to do with the core building system. By 2003, costs had spiraled out of control, sets were becoming more expensive to design than they were to sell, and the company reported some of the worst financial losses in its history. The real turning point came in 2004 with the appointment of Jürgen Vig Knudstorp as CEO. Under his leadership, LEGO began rethinking everything. The company began scaling back aggressively, removing distractions that weren't tied to the brick. LEGO sold or scaled back parts of its theme park operations and cut down peripheral businesses that were draining resources. Internally, they made one of the most important moves of all, reducing the number of unique pieces from about 12,900 to around 7,000. This massive simplification not only cut costs but also restored focus to the design system that initially built LEGO's reputation. The approach was summed up in a guiding principle called Back to the Brick, a commitment to make the iconic studded brick and the creative system around it the center of the company once again. This discipline created breathing room the company had not seen in years. Core lines like LEGO City and Technic provided stability, while expansions, licensed themes, or premium sets were added with care. What makes this story striking is how much growth came not from adding more, but from intentionally stripping away excess. By simplifying operations, LEGO positioned itself to think differently about its future audience. Children still bought sets, but adults began to view these redesigned products as more than toys. A large-scale set wasn't just playtime anymore. It was a centerpiece for a desk, a nostalgic collectible tied to childhood, or even a status symbol that signaled taste and identity. With its foundation restored, the company was now in a position to build something entirely new. The next step in their transformation drew not from operations or efficiency, but from something far more powerful: the emotions of the adults who had grown up with those little plastic bricks and were now ready to pay handsomely to feel that connection again. LEGO's next breakthrough came not from streamlining pieces, but from strategically targeting adults who had outgrown the toy aisle while still holding on to the memories attached to it. This is where nostalgia was transformed into a deliberate business engine. By the late 1990s, LEGO discovered that licensing partnerships could turn popular culture into a bridge between childhood memories and adult spending power. The launch of Star Wars sets in 1999, coinciding with the release of The Phantom Menace set the template. Suddenly, fans could rebuild iconic ships and scenes, connecting deeply familiar stories with a product that carried prestige as well as play. This wasn't treated as just another toy, it was a cultural artifact. A few years later, Harry Potter set strengthened this approach, serving a generation of fans who had grown up alongside the books and films. LEGO recognized that pop culture was no longer only for kids, it was the shared language of entire generations. Adults who identified with these franchises didn't let the identity fade over time. Instead, it matured into a market ready to embrace large-scale, high-priced sets. For LEGO, licensed themes became the perfect staging ground for nostalgia marketing. Take the Ultimate Collector Series Millennium Falcon. It is one of LEGO's largest and most expensive sets, but notice how the company presented it, not as a child's pastime, but as a meticulously detailed display piece. Marketing emphasized scale, accuracy, and craftsmanship, with photography that made it look at home on a collector's shelf rather than in a playroom. What LEGO effectively sold was not just bricks, but the right to display cultural memory in an adult living space. The material value didn't change. It was still plastic, but the framing shifted the purchase from toy to collectible, an emotional transaction disguised as a premium product. This reframing was reinforced by how LEGO positioned adults as an official audience. In 2020, the company introduced its Adults Welcome campaign and the 18+ Icons line, giving grown-up fans explicit permission to view LEGO as a pursuit of taste and sophistication. These sets were packaged in darker, minimalist boxes, marketed with language tied to craftsmanship and relaxation rather than play. In effect, LEGO's leadership didn't just acknowledge adults. They formally carved out space where building became aspirational. Fan participation deepened the sense of ownership. LEGO Ideas, a platform that lets fans submit and vote on set concepts, gave adults the feeling that their passions could literally shape the catalog. Winning submissions like the Friends Central Perk or retro video game consoles weren't random picks. They were products chosen by and for nostalgic audiences. When a fan-designed set was turned into a retail kit, it doubled the emotional impact. Not only was nostalgia being sold back, but the buyers felt like part of the creative process itself. On top of this, LEGO re-released classic models from earlier decades, bringing childhood favorites back with updated builds. For customers, these weren't new purchases so much as reconnections, a way to rebuild old memories with present-day resources. Combined with earned income and disposable budgets, the decision felt less like a splurge and more like reclaiming a piece of personal history. One result of this strategy has been staggering growth. In recent years, LEGO has reported record-breaking sales, with revenues reaching nearly 10 billion euros in 2024. Adult-focused sets have become a sizable and growing share of that success. The brand's ability to convert nostalgia into consistent premium purchases shows how deliberate the pivot was and how profitable. But nostalgia alone doesn't explain why adults come back again and again, spending thousands across multiple sets. Rebuilding a childhood favorite sparks one emotional rush, but what transforms that spark into ongoing behavior? What makes adults feel not just sentimental joy, but a sense of urgency and anxiety that if they delay, they may lose their chance forever? That question leads to the next piece of LEGO's strategy, the one that turned nostalgia into repeat purchasing through fear of missing out. What if I told you that LEGO sets don't just sell out? They often gain value the moment they retire? This isn't fan myth or speculation. LEGO has a predictable product life cycle, where most sets remain in production for only a few years before being removed from shelves. Once a set retires, supply vanishes overnight, and the aftermarket takes over. For fans and collectors, this design scarcity creates a constant sense of urgency: buy now or regret later. Here's what makes this so effective. Retirement itself seems ordinary. Products come and go all the time in every industry, but LEGO adds layers of scarcity to the process. Sets tied to big franchises or unique minifigures are often produced in limited runs, never guaranteed to return. This means that once the final box is sold, prices in the secondary market often climb steeply. Collectors watch this happen again and again, which conditions them to treat every purchase like a timed investment decision rather than a casual buy. A famous example is the Mr. Gold minifigure released in 2013. Only about 5,000 were produced worldwide, hidden randomly in collectible blind bags. Within weeks, resale values soared to thousands of dollars per figure. For fans, the lesson was clear: if you hesitated, you lost. Scarcity didn't just raise demand, it fueled stories of impossible finds and expensive regrets, narratives that reinforced urgency across the entire community. The impact of this system is visible every day for buyers. When you see a set tied to Star Wars, Harry Potter, or even a nostalgic original theme, you know it won't sit on the shelf indefinitely. The clock is ticking, even if the company never publishes an official date. Instead of calmly weighing options, buyers start weighing consequences. Should you buy it now at retail price, or risk having to pay 2 or 3 times as much on the resale market later? That cycle, retirement, scarcity, aftermarket spike, repeat, creates the fear of missing out that drives repeat purchasing. For years, LEGO left the resale market as an unofficial side activity among fans. But in 2019, the company made a strategic move by acquiring Bricklink, the world's largest online marketplace for LEGO parts and sets. This gave LEGO direct insight into what was happening after sets retired, which items were spiking in value, which fan groups were collecting aggressively, and how scarcity shaped long-term demand. Officially, Bricklink remained a community hub, but for LEGO's leadership, it also became a valuable data source for refining release strategies and gauging how scarcity influenced purchasing cycles. By structurally limiting supply and designing products worth displaying, LEGO transformed purchases from casual toys into timed collector decisions. That raised both the buyer's urgency and their tolerance for price, reshaping customer behavior. Consumer psychology explains why. Without a fixed supply timeline, buyers calculate utility. Under scarcity, they calculate regret. That hesitation gap fuels panic buying while making discounts less necessary. With nostalgia and scarcity blended together, fans view sets not only as displays of creativity, but as assets that could appreciate, turning shelves into both decoration and investment portfolios. This psychological equation, personal memory plus perceived value, ensures steady demand year after year. Scarcity sets the tempo of desire, but another force quietly amplified adult spending: how LEGO reframed the act of building itself. Beyond nostalgia and urgency, the company positioned construction as a form of calm and focus, a solution for modern stress packaged in bricks. What if your evening ritual could double as a form of therapy, while also convincing you to spend hundreds of dollars? LEGO understood that possibility and built an entire strategy around it. In recent years, the company shifted its messaging toward adults explicitly, rolling out campaigns like Adults Welcome and Find Your Flow. These weren't slogans tossed onto ads. They were part of a deliberate positioning that reframed LEGO as more than a toy. It became a tool for calm, concentration, and mental reset. This pivot wasn't guesswork. LEGO backed it with data from its ongoing Play Well research, a global study of tens of thousands of participants. One of the clearest findings was that most adults reported play helped them reduce stress and unwind from daily pressures. Instead of simply marketing to nostalgia, LEGO seized on that insight. Building became more than entertainment. It was marketed as a therapeutic process you could justify investing in. Think about the product lines created with this purpose. The architecture range offered meticulous skyline builds of cities like London or New York, meant for display rather than play. The botanical collection introduced intricate flowers and plants, sets that sat perfectly on a desk or bookshelf as calming decor. The art mosaic sets invited buyers to place thousands of tiny studs into patterned portraits, a process designed to be repetitive, focused, and absorbing. Each example leaned into one customer need: slowing down and finding a sense of flow while producing something beautiful. By reframing these sets as structured, meditative projects, LEGO blurred the line between consumption and self-care. A $120 bouquet of bricks was not presented as a splurge. It was a wellness expense, comparable to a spa day or a yoga retreat, but one that could be repeated every time the builder returned to the model. This framing matters because it gives adults permission to spend significantly more money without guilt. Instead of rationalizing the cost as just a toy, they began to see it as an investment in personal recovery from the demands of modern life. Psychologists point out that spending tied to well-being is evaluated entirely differently by consumers. When a purchase feels like an act of self-care, people are less likely to regret it and more willing to spend at higher levels. LEGO leaned into that psychology openly. Its Find Your Flow campaign didn't hide behind nostalgia. It focused squarely on mindfulness, directly claiming the product as a way to manage stress. Events like LEGO Lates, designed for adults, extended the concept into live experiences where play, social connection, and relaxation merged into a branded ritual. The physical retail environment reinforced the same message. LEGO stores were redesigned not as toy aisles, but as clean, premium display spaces. Sets appeared under soft lighting, arranged like works of art. Adults were encouraged to handle bricks in store, to pause and experience the sensation before purchase. Buying became less about grabbing a box off a shelf and more about participating in a ritual, one where the sale itself felt like an act of self-investment. Reframing their products as both a ritual and a wellness tool, LEGO raised price tolerance dramatically because buyers weren't just paying for bricks. They were buying calm, focus, and an identity aligned with mindful living. The strategy shows that when you attach your product to emotional outcomes, higher price points become not just acceptable, but expected. LEGO's rise wasn't just about saving a toy company, it was about proving how powerful simple bricks can become when you attach them to identity, ritual, and scarcity. What looks like a playful hobby is actually one of the most profitable psychological systems in the world. The brand managed to embed itself in adult lives as an emotional and therapeutic ecosystem. And that's the bigger lesson here. The most successful brands aren't really selling products. They're selling feelings. Nostalgia, urgency, status, even therapy. The bricks are just the medium. If you want to keep uncovering the hidden strategies companies use to control our attention and our wallets, make sure to subscribe, because next time, we'll dive into another brand whose marketing looks innocent on the surface, but hides a darker truth underneath.